Engine 1 from car 1. Car 1's on scene at Subin Command. Give me a CAN report.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Yeah. So I always pronounce it Levesque, but if you pronounce it Levesque, that's also fine. That's another accepted enunciation of my last name. I was told long ago what the difference is between the French and the American, and I can't remember what. So I've just said Levesque, but sometimes my dad says Levesque, so that confuses me. But yeah, it doesn't matter. No, I'm not running it. I am part of the group of people who are, I would say, for lack of a better term, yeah, running it. But at least putting it together and making it happen. I would say that. Yeah. No, there's no titles for to give you an idea as to how it all kind of happened, because that's probably a better term. So I attended, as you did, down in Florida, a conference down there, and I said, why can't we have a conference like this in New Hampshire? Now, obviously, we don't have the same infrastructure like the white sandy beaches and the nice hotel with a pool, right? So we don't have that type of infrastructure. We also didn't have the high name fire service that instructors that are nationally known. But I said, there's no reason why we can't have something like this in New Hampshire. So I am involved with the Lakes Region Mutual Fire Aid training group. So for those that don't know, Lakes Region Mutual Fire Aid is a big mutual fire aid in New Hampshire of a bunch of different towns, and they have a training division. So I went to them and I said, hey, I went to Florida. I went to this great conference. I'd like to have something like that here in New Hampshire. And they agreed. Excuse me. So they agreed and they said, yeah, we definitely should. And we started planning it out. And my role was just whatever kind of small tasks needed to be done. So we were looking at schedules, what type of instructors, and what type of classes we wanted, because it was the first ever conference. And you start going down the road of a fire service conference. What road do you take and what topics? And we have nothing to base this off of, right? There's nothing here that we could say like, well, these people do this type of conference and these people do this conference, so we're going to fill this niche here. There was none of that. There's nothing in New Hampshire. Whatever you wanted to do for a conference, it was wide open. So we got together a plan really quickly, surprisingly, but the registration was very low. We partnered with Lakes Region Community College to host it there, and they've been great partners. But that year we had to decide that we weren't going to do the conference because of the low enrollment. So we went back to the drawing board. I started working with a couple other people, one from Lakes Region Community College and one from Lakes Region Mutual Fire Aid. And the three of us kind of put the last year conference together. So none of us held an official title or role. It was just whatever needed to be done. One of us picked up the ball and ran with it. So go ahead.
To sandy beaches, you're referring to Pensacola.
Oh yes. Yeah, I didn't want to give it away where it was, but yeah, absolutely. And group down there, they do a fantastic job. I mean, it was a conference in January, which helped with escaping New Hampshire. So, and it was also geared towards bringing your family. So, me and a few other guys from Hudson, we brought our wives down, and so that made vacation for us as well. So, not only were we, getting to learn, but we were getting to vacation and enjoy Florida. So it was a great conference, and obviously, you know, hard to replicate that sort of thing in New Hampshire. But my goal was we got to start somewhere. We got to try something because I was fortunate enough that I could do that. But as you know, that's kind of a burden on people to try to travel across the country and go to great conferences. So my philosophy was let's try to do something here in New Hampshire that's going to be worthwhile, especially where the majority of our firefighters in the state are volunteer and aren't getting paid to go to conferences and things like that. When we left off from last year's conference, we decided that we would convene a larger group of people. And so now it's just a committee within the Lakes Region Mutual Fire Aid Training Division. And I think there's probably about 6 or 7 of us. And we don't really have titles except for one person is the chair of the committee, and another person is the secretary, making sure we take notes and follow up on things. And that's where it's at. The rest of us, there's no titles. We're just trying to help and trying to make the conference a success. So yeah, it's been exciting, and I can't wait for this year's because I think it'll be that much better. Now that we have one under our belts, I think second year is going to be even better.
That's great. I love the fact that you were inspired to bring something back to New Hampshire. I think that's what's important about going to conferences, kind of fire tactics, right? Like that's what we're referring to, the
Absolutely.
Pennsylvania beaches. And I think it's great to reference those conferences because that's what they're there for, is to motivate, inspire, and to bring these things back to our own state. And when I go to these conferences, I say the same thing. I always talk to my friends and say, we need this up here as well. Why don't we have anything like this in New Hampshire? Either it's a hands-on hot class or a lecture, presentations. We don't have a lot of that, and that was the huge void that I saw when I started going to conferences. Was we have some great things in our state, but the one thing that's really lacking for the fire service or first responders is an actual training that everyone can enjoy, but not having to go to Florida or Georgia or Texas or California. We have to travel so far to get this outside education, and we have some really good things happening in the New Hampshire Fire Service. We're just not coming together as a group and making it happen. And I mean, when I go to Texas, like, man, there are some hard chargers there. There are some knowledgeable people that come to these, but they're also from all over. They're not just Texas and they're not just Florida, but they've done their time to educate themselves for that general area and that population. And we could do the same up here. And when I heard about you doing the New Hampshire Fire Conference, I was so proud that you brought not only you, but a group of individuals came together for one mission, and that's to make our first responder field, our fire service field, stronger by introducing education and presenters and lecturers and hands-on classes to the state of New Hampshire. Like I know you have Jake Pullen that came and did his presentation. He did a presentation, but he also did a hands-on class with ladders. And I think
Right.
it's people like that. Like Jake is that a cattail?
Yes. We're going to have to be fighting with that, but that's okay.
But I think that's great that, like you have people like Jake, who's obviously is super motivated, passionate, loves the fire service, loves to teach, wants to make people better, wants to give back from all the knowledge that he's gained. I hope it grows and continues to build because we need this in the Granite State.
Absolutely. And one of the benefits that we have in New Hampshire is because we're small, we know some of these people, so we can reach out to them and they can get there. Like in Texas, that's a big state. Mm-hmm. So to try to get everybody in Texas on the same page with something, probably pretty difficult. And then even when you look nationwide, we have talent here in New Hampshire, and you're absolutely right. We just haven't really brought everybody together to do that. Now, part of it is because we're resource limited. And I'm sure no matter who you talk to, they would say that they're resource limited. You talk to guys on FDNY, they say that they're resource limited. But we can put on something not the size of Pensacola, not what County Fire Tactics does. And we can do something that's still pretty good. And if you like those smaller conferences, then, as you start going to conferences, you want to learn more, then you have the opportunity to go to County Fire Tactics and any one of their conferences. And by the way, it's not just fire conferences. There's EMS conferences out there. And I know that with the fire conference, I've tried to keep it focused on fire because I think that that's what we're lacking. But we are also lacking EMS conferences in New Hampshire.
Oh,
So, right. So that would be, I don't want to, make any promises, but that's my next focus. Once this gets up and running is to get that up and running. And you would have thought that would have been the opposite, that my first focus would have been EMS, but my first focus was fire. So, and luckily,
I think
found
absolutely,
someone.
man. I love it. You're absolutely right. There is not, as far as I know, there's not a huge want right now for EMS training or conferences. I mean, there's only I know like GEMS put something on, I think, but you don't have a whole lot. And we do a lot of EMS services in the state of New Hampshire. And it's hard. You don't want to exclude people who are in, who are paramedics or just the general EMS field. Unfortunately, fire service does take the brunt of all of it and encompasses what we do. But there's a lot of people in the EMS field that just want to go and learn about EMS hands-on skills. And I think there's an open field for that, and we don't do enough of it. And doing the Explorer Academy program, a lot of those kids, when we get the reviews, the biggest thing they say is we want to do more EMS tracks.
Which is
and you
mind
helped out
blowing,
with that, right? And you were a
mind
big
blowing.
part of that. Like you helped this
Absolutely.
last summer, and you did a fantastic job. And I think you saw how excited those kids were to get their hands on and actually do some EMS work, and to use the tools that we use in the ambulance, to be in the ambulance and do some mock calls. So those kids were wicked excited, and they wanted to
Absolutely.
do it. And I think that if we also show that this may maybe not look cool, but if we actually make EMS look cool, then maybe people would be more apt to actually do more of it. I mean, there's some incredible medics out there who do amazing work, and they don't have to be firefighters to be cool. And
Right.
it's just again, fire service encompasses the EMS field because it's a need, but I think we need more of it. And like you said, that you're going to introduce that into your fire conference. I think that definitely is going to be super helpful, especially in our area.
Yeah, and that's something that we've talked about is, how do we include EMS in the New Hampshire Fire Conference? And I'd like to, but where do you start losing focus? And even with the fire conference, it's, do we want to stick with strategies and tactics, or do you want to go through leadership, or how many different of the tech rescues do you want to go through? Auto extrication, and do you want to go through rope rescue? Like, there's so much that you could offer. In any one of those topics, you could say that we're lacking this in the state, we're lacking this in the state. So where do you start? And so our focus this coming year will be more of a firefighter and strategy and tactics view, and more of a leadership view. And if we have good enrollment and we can support it, we'll do a third like EMS track type. And I also know that one of the bigger things that we hear a lot of is driver operator. And maybe someday we can do some of those things. Maybe we can do something that has to do with building up instructors as well, because there's a difference between leadership in the firehouse and being a fire service instructor or an educator, right? So
yeah, I love it. There's some great ideas, and like you said, you got to start small. I mean, all the other conferences we just referenced, they started small. They didn't just blow up the day one. They had to build it from the ground up. They had to be validated, and people are pretty smart in our world, and they go to a conference, and if you don't have good material, if you don't have good instructors, they're just gonna walk away and go, well, that was a waste of $200 and never come back again. So
right.
you got to make sure that you have good content, good instructors, and that's something that's built over time. And again, CFT, that didn't become what it is today the first day. I mean, I'm sure it was a very small operation, and you look at the pictures that Kurt puts up there, and they definitely started small, but he knew what he was talking about. He knew how to build his team, and he selected and chose his team, and that's why it's where it is today.
Right.
The thing that we can do up here is is if we have good, knowledgeable brothers and sisters that are passionate about EMS, that are passionate about the fire service and bringing it back to everybody else, and don't have an ego. I think that's the biggest part too, is some people who teach have a huge ego and it comes off real negative, and so that will turn people off. If you have people that actually care about giving back and being passionate about what they're teaching without the ego, then everybody else has that buy-in and wants to come back for more. So I think you're definitely onto something. And that's at the college again this year?
Yeah, so we'll be doing it again at Lakes Region Community College, and that will be in September. So I believe very shortly we'll be sending out the save the dates, and shortly after that, registration will be open. And we've also done a lot to try to keep the costs reasonable, so that way, like you said, if you go and you spend $200 on a conference versus you spend $30 to $40 on a conference, that is a little bit more manageable. And we want to be conscious about people's time as well. It's not easy to give up a Saturday or a Friday to go to a conference.
So are you trying to do for 3 days?
This year will just be one day, and we'll see where it goes. I mean, we've talked about 2 days, 3 days. It really depends on how successful this becomes, and it also depends on how much time we all want to put into it. It's that day, last conference. Just to tell a quick story, I was out in Vegas for EMS World Expo, and I was coming back the night before the conference. The conference was on a Saturday. I was coming back the night before. Well, my flight got delayed, so I had to fly in. I had originally flown out from Manchester. I had to fly into Phoenix and then overnight into Boston. Got into Boston. I got an Uber to Manchester Airport, got in my car, and showed up just around 8:15 when the conference was starting in Laconia.
Wow.
So that's year. So I'm hoping not to repeat that. But yeah, it was like, for me, it was like a lot of, okay, I'm going to go here because I was presenting. So I had to go out to that conference and then come back. And yeah, it was quite a bit. So hopefully we're going to avoid that this year. But yeah, everybody that's participating, it's all volunteer. We're not getting paid to put on this conference, but it's because we all believe in that mission to make the fire service in New Hampshire that much better prepared to do our jobs.
That's fantastic. Like I said, I can't say enough about it. I'm happy you're bringing that, and your group is bringing that, and I'm looking forward to see how much it grows and succeeds in the mission. Now with that, we also do you talked about instructors and making sure that there's instructors and officers. Since you are a training officer for Hudson Fire, what's that like? What do you see the field like for training officers?
Well, so my role was interesting because it obviously it was approved, so we didn't have that training officer really set in stone, right? It was taken on by deputies, and then it went to a captain. Excuse me. And so, but it was always just as somebody's ancillary duties. So now it was cemented as a training officer position, a training captain. And the department had previously had that quite a few years ago. And then because of budget cuts, it went away. So I was pretty much starting from scratch as far as this position, and which is interesting because now I can make the position kind of what I wanted. And nobody really knew what to expect and what, they're like, hey, are you going to be doing this? And some people were like asking me, oh, well, are you going to start doing more EMS stuff? Now, my background is as an EMS educator because for a number of years I was in charge of an advanced EMT program. So I was constantly teaching EMS, like hundreds and hundreds of hours every year. And that's primarily when I go and I teach at conferences, that's what I'm talking about is EMS. So everybody said, well, naturally, you'll just start doing EMS training. And the message from the chief, the intent is that this was not supposed to be an EMS training. This was supposed to be about fire because this is what we are lacking in. We have outside people doing EMS instruction for our department, but we have nobody who is focusing entirely on fire training, as well as all the other things that need to happen, right? When we need to do officer development training, that doesn't happen. And consistently, right, when you talk to people all over the country, the problems are the same, right? There's very little to do with professional development or officer development, and it's a problem. So our department was coming into a very unique time where we were starting to pull out from what we call the summer of 2023, where we had a lot of people leave. About 25% of our department either retired or went to other departments.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was so we were pulling out of that. So in 2024, we saw a lot of new people to come in to replace that, and we're still a very, very young department now. I would say that without looking up any figures, most of our people are within 1 to 2 or 3 years on the job.
Do you guys run any kind of reports of why you happen to have lost so many people to other departments, or did they leave because they go to other departments? Did they leave because they didn't want to do the job anymore?
Yeah, so our department actually well, not our department, our town actually hired MRI, the municipal resources, to come in and actually look at that and figure out why it was. And the reasons were varied. I think that the pandemic wasn't listed on there specifically, but I think a lot of people were feeling burnout from that, and it was time, once they hit their years to just get out.
Mm-hmm.
Then obviously we lost some people to the larger departments such as Manchester and Nashua, which is very historic for us, right? One of the things that we looked at were, are we losing people to similar sized departments? So we weren't losing anybody going to, the Londonderrys and Derrys. So we were like, okay, so we're in that middle, I would say mid-sized department, right? And we weren't losing anybody to those middle-sized departments. So, okay, where are people going? Well, they were going to either a larger department that didn't provide EMS for ambulance transports, right? And we also lost people who were going to, I would say, more personal reasons. So one guy left so he could go to a department closer to home, because for him that was important. And so we're like, okay, so it isn't, there wasn't for us anything that we could have done there, right? It was just more convenient for him. So there was a variety of reasons why people were leaving. And so we worked really hard on, trying to define what would make our department someplace that people want to come work at. So over that same year, 2023 to 2024, the department also was doing a new contract negotiation with the town. So we got an excellent contract that not only addressed pay increases, but we also put in a new provision called, it was, I wouldn't say a promotion, but it's a new designation called Master Firefighter. And I think that this is something that maybe the fire service in general should look at if departments haven't, because it comes with a little bit of pay, but in order to get that pay, you have to get certain certifications. And some people, departments get stipends, but they don't get the recognition like, hey, all these certifications together make you a master firefighter.
Bro, I absolutely love. Obviously, in New Hampshire, where we're from, Merrimack incorporates that, and I think it's a great idea. My previous department, I tried to have us institute that. I brought that idea to my chief. It never went anywhere. I think it helps a lot because guys grow stagnant, and they can get all the education and certs they want, but if it doesn't help them, they don't do anything with it, and they don't move from any position that they're in, then you're going to have stagnant growth. Maybe like, well, I can't move up, and I can get all these things, but don't mean anything anymore. I'm tapped out on, I'm capped out on whatever I can get back from, reimbursements or, incentive pay for getting further education. Granted, we want to educate ourselves because we want to be educated, but let's be honest that a lot of people want to get these certs or education because they want a pay increase or
Right.
go for promotions. But I think the master firefighter position is honestly a great addition to the fire service in our area specifically because of there's you help to now educate and move up the officers. You're a master firefighter. You've now if she's, like you said, like usually it's going to be an operator of all vehicles, tanker, ladder, engine. You're now you have your instructor, you have your fire inspector, you have all these things that are going to move you up to be ready to be an officer. Now the next step is, since you're a master firefighter, you're going to be trained on how to be a fire officer. So that way they see your potential, they see you want to move up, they see you are not a person just to sit there and do nothing. This is officer type material. And I love it. I think it's a great idea to bring to our service for guys and girls to want to do more and inspire them to want to grow.
Right. And it's not only for those people who are looking to become officers. When we put on some of the classes internally that were needed to become master firefighters, we had a number of people who are not looking to get promoted. There are senior firefighters who say, we have, no aspirations to become a firefighter, but we'd like to get that master firefighter because now it's a pay increase. And obviously, you and I both know that contracts, once you reach 5 or 6 years on the job, you've pretty much maxed out your top step of most contracts, right? There's some places that have multiple steps for multiple years, but for us, it's a finite amount. So if somebody's there for 5 years and they have these certifications, they'll become master firefighter, and now they have that little bit of extra pay recognition. And showing, it's just helping to keep people in the department a little bit longer and recognize them for the hard work and dedication that they've made to staying with the department. So
absolutely,
there's multiple reasons.
It's definitely not just a promotion. It's just one example, obviously, but I think it helps for people just to grow and just not sit there and do nothing. Because I don't know, there's some mindsets of, why do I need to do this? It's because I'm not going to get any more money out of getting my fire instructor. I'm not going to get any more money out of getting an inspector, so I'm not going to bother. I'm never going to use it. But
right.
If those are requirements of a master firefighter program, and then you get a pay incentive of reaching that level, well, you're going to need those certs. You're going to need the education. So I love it. I think that's a great idea. And so you guys have instituted that now, correct?
Yes, and we have, without looking at the numbers, probably about at least 5 or 6 people who have made that master firefighter switch. And the other benefit of the master firefighter is that if they do decide to become an officer, it puts them at a little bit of a higher pay scale right off the bat. So instead of being at the lower steps, they come in at a higher step for lieutenant. So for us, it's a win-win. If that person doesn't ever to become an officer, then they've got that education. And if they do become an officer, they've gone through that extra education that is no longer applicable to their job, but would help them when they're developing firefighters.
Sure. How long have you instituted this new position or title?
This was effective in July, because that's when our contract became effective. So we had to work, really, that was one of my first challenges as a training officer, because under the new contract, we also had 3 classes that we needed were the driver operator all vehicles, the driver operator pump operator, and the driver aerial. So we had to offer those all 3 classes internally within a year of the contract being effective. So that meant that, again, as a training officer, I have to start coordinating that and getting in touch with the people at the state so that we could bring those classes in. And we successfully had all 3 of those classes already. So we were able to get that done way ahead of schedule. People didn't think that we were going to get this done until March or April. We got it done before December. So we're moving forward with that. And the other benefit now is we're bringing on people internally as state instructors. So now we can offer those classes internally. So now all of our probationary firefighters, when they're coming through this recruit school that we have, the 5th week of recruit school is driver operator all vehicles. So by the time they're out of recruit school, they'll have that certification, which enables a couple things for us. It's that first step in this master firefighter process. And so we say, hey, you've got one of the 3 classes that you need, and you just got to stay here for 5 years. And as long as you get those 2 other classes, you'll get a nice pay increase. So it's a good benefit for them. And also it was to have another step in the process so that when they're hitting probation, they've gone through some driver operator stuff. So day one, they can start driving the ambulances, they can start driving the engines, because as you know, we're resource limited. So we can't have the luxury of having people just be assigned an engineer and not have to worry about it. Everybody in our department needs to be able to do everything. You need to be a driver operator of an engine, driver operator of an aerial device, of a tanker, a forestry, as well as a dispatcher, which is also very unique to us at Hudson. So, and all of those things need to be done, as well as get your advanced EMT certification by the time probation is over. So it's a heavy lift for our probationary firefighters.
Yeah, that's a lot. How well received was the Master Firefighter program within the department and within internally with the guys in the line?
I think a lot of people are embracing it. As you can see, we have a lot of the people who are eligible to get that. So they have been there either 4 or 5 years, immediately start asking and wanting those classes. And even before we were offering it internally, they were going outside. Some of them were going outside the department to immediately begin getting those classes. So there was a very positive response. We have started talking about building that into our regular training that we do offer annually. So a lot of people are excited about that. So we'll see.
That's amazing. So now with the driver program, you've teamed up with other departments, right? Is there like a kind of a teamwork that's now been with other departments to help, again, being short-staffed and not having enough instructors and trying to really implement this driver program, whether it's aerials, engine, driver ops, because there's only so many instructors for the state to be able to do this program. So I believe other departments, right, have teamed up together to help pretty much everybody get these required education, and all those departments benefit from.
Right. Yeah, there's a loose training consortium between the area departments in southern New Hampshire. I haven't quite tapped into that just yet, and that's only because I'm still relatively new in my position. But the discussions are there. Obviously, I have a pretty good working relationship with the guys in Londonderry and Derry. I've started talking with people in in Nashua as well, even though they're a big city, but we still talk with them and we still work well with them. So I'm thinking that we'll see some exciting things coming forward. Our last aerial class, we had Londonderry come over because they had a tower and we had a ladder. So they were able to get some hands-on with the ladder. We were able to get some hands-on with the tower. And, it's just good to know your neighbors. And, those guys were excellent to work with. So the more that we can partner with our area departments, the better we'll be ultimately.
That's awesome. So your training program that you have within your department, it's 5 weeks, you said.
Sorry. Yeah. So our recruit program. Sorry, the cat found the wrapper again. I don't know if you can hear that too well, but if she's being too loud. So yeah, it's a 5-week program, and we start with. Actually, to have me back up, let me get the cat. I love her. Yes. So the original concept for the program came about because of this massive loss of our personnel. And we were replacing them with 5 or 6 guys at a time. And we decided that we would have a recruit school. And it started out with, okay, these are all the topics that we think we should be going to teach them. And, the schedule was whatever our lieutenants or captains could do. So, okay, this person could do this day, so they'll do SEBA, and this person can do this day, so they'll do ropes. And it was just a hodgepodge of different skills and instructors. So we did, I think, 3 recruit schools. And then in July, when I got promoted, we were starting a recruit school like the week after I got promoted. So I had 1 week to get adjusted to my role, and then they said, "Here you go. Here's 3 recruits for you, and running recruit school." So the schedule was already set, the instructors were already set, so I had to just tag along and learn about how each instructor did it, how The whole recruit school was laid out. And then that last week, the driver operator, we hadn't even got that up and running yet. So I had to come up with something that would meet what the Board of Selectmen were looking for, because the Board of Selectmen wanted to get rid of the CDL requirement, but they wanted to make sure that there was still some driving. So I had to make sure that that was actually a valid process, that I could produce something for the chief, so the chief could go to the Board of Selectmen and say, they learned something this week, even though they didn't have an actual certification.
Why did they want to get rid of the CDL requirement?
Because it was with the new federal requirements, right? In order for someone to get their CDL, they have to go through an official educational program. So back even when I got my CDL, it was, you can go do your written, you can get your permit, do some driving, and in the firehouse, we just went over the engine and learned how to do a CDL pre-check, right? And then when you were ready, you scheduled your test, you went to the DMV, and they allowed you to test.
Mm-hmm.
And which, by the way, that was probably one of the harder tests I've ever done in the fire service. Like, my paramedic practicals were easier than the DMV pre-check, right?
Yeah, they don't make it easy.
No. So they changed the federal requirements to say that before you go and do your pre-chip test, your driving test, you have to go through some sort of official federal motor carrier class. Now, the only places that were offering this were like the tractor trailer schools, and those are like $3,000 to $5,000. And the department was like, we can't swallow that cost, and neither can our recruits, right? They're getting out of mommy's basement, mom and dad's basement, getting their first real job, and we're telling them, hey, you got to cough up $3,000 to $5,000 to keep this job.
Plus getting your A.
Plus get your A. It was just, we're just like, this is just not sustainable for us. So, the Board of Selectmen said, hey, we really want this CDL requirement, but we understand that this is causing a hardship. So what can we do? So now we've replaced that with the driver operator program to say, hey, even though they don't have their CDL, they're still getting educated as to how to drive and operate, a big engine. And we're also having a third party, right? The New Hampshire Fire Academy still has to come do their test. So they're still getting a valid test for education and for the practical portion of that. So
is there an insurance issue with not having your CDL?
No, we actually, as a department, that was one of the things that they went and investigated. And because there's no law in New Hampshire that says that the firefighters, right, were exempt from the law saying that we need to have a CDL, there's also no insurance benefit to having a CDL. So that came from our insurance carrier, said it doesn't matter to us. So that was also like the final nail in the coffin to say, hey, you don't need your CDL, because not only are we exempt from it, but there's actually no insurance benefit from us having a CDL. So, yeah, that's just dispelling a couple of myths that existed for a long time that we finally got a discernible answer about. But, we still thought that it was in our best interest to make sure that guys are still trained,
of course,
how to operate these big trucks. So that's where we came up with doing the driver operator program. And so far that's worked out well for us. So we'll continue that program and making sure that people have, all the hours that they need. So that way, if they want to go get their CDL, they can, because if they do the driver operator program, that also counts for the education to go do your CDL.
I think it's great. Actually, it's a really good program. I am one of the instructors for it, and I love teaching it. And the fact I think that now departments are teaming up for that one mission, that they're utilizing individual trucks to bring them to these trainings, that departments have state staff instructors on staff as well as part of their employees in their department. And so we're utilizing those instructors within those departments and not have to rely on the academy to bring one person in, because as we know, Eric Ewitz is the coordinator for that program. He does a great job, but he's only one guy. And he does get a lot of crap because, I hear a lot, well, we're waiting for this class. We're waiting. And man, I know he'd love to be, if he could multiply himself and be at every, department in the state to give these classes, he would. But Now we actually have the ability, once these instructors get signed off to teach it, now these departments are utilizing their employees who are signed off as instructors to be able to teach that. And I've already seen the fact that we can get these classes, they're out there now, and nobody's having to wait long periods of time for one class to pop up. There's multiple classes popping up within Hudson, Bedford, Derry, Londonderry, just to name it, Goffstown. I mean, it's actually impressive to see all these departments in the general area starting to pop up more classes. The driver op, the aerial, the engine, and that's really helping the fire service in New Hampshire to get this education that is so desperately needed. Because I just remember when I first started, getting those classes were pretty few and far between, because you really only had one person who could only go and set those classes within each department, and that would take months. So I'm glad that we're all teaming together, and that's the thing that one thing I feel that our state is kind of bad at is we don't team up together to accomplish one mission. We're getting better at it, but back in the day, it was really individualistic.
Yeah, and one of the things that we were discussing about them going back to the New Hampshire Fire Conference, right, is so if you have those specialized individuals, and Eric Hewitt is one of them, right? If he is keeping up on all the latest trends in, let's say, aerial operations or with the aerial apparatus, right? I would say that there's probably not a lot of people that are aerial apparatus nerds in the state, right? So how is it that we can deliver the aerial class the same quality if we're not keeping up with that stuff, but he is, right? So if we had a medium for him to say, listen, here's the latest and greatest on what's coming down, and here's this, or hey, I just learned this little neat fact about aerial trucks. So anybody that's getting, you know, a mid mount, or anybody's getting a rear mount, like here's some important information. And we had something like the New Hampshire Fire Conference where, hey, if you are a state instructor or you're a staff instructor that's teaching this, you want to go and you want to hear what he has to say, because this could be pertinent for all the classes that you're teaching. Mm-hmm. Right? That's where I really hope the conference goes as well, is what are the updates. And we talk about driver operator, but you could put that for any topic. What's the latest with nozzles, what's the latest with hose, right? And if there's somebody who's a subject matter expert, right, and we have people all over the state who go, and they're the ones who go out and they learn these things, and now they would have a medium to come back and present to the rest of us, so that when we are teaching our programs, we can have that kind of same information accessible to us, because we heard it from them, instead of having to go out, to one of the apparatus manufacturers, or read a technical bulletin that we don't understand to try to relay that information. So
absolutely, when I go to conferences, the fact that my department, they support it so much, and the biggest thing they always say is, we want to make sure you're teaching us when you come back. And I think that speaks volumes for a department to have that much faith in an employee to obtain so much knowledge, and then have them come back and teach their guys. But to take it a step further, like you just said, if I've gone out and done my due diligence and gained those skills and gained that knowledge, and then we have a conference for the state of New Hampshire, that people like us who go out and gain that knowledge can actually now bring it to more people within the state, not just our departments, but now, again, we're paying it forward, not just individual departments, but now we're bringing it to people who want to come to our conferences within New Hampshire and hear from people who have invested their time and their energy to give forth that knowledge that they've obtained elsewhere. I think that's really important for each person that goes out and seeks that knowledge to pay it back their departments, and then again to go out into the state and be able to speak in front of all those people, to be able to give that knowledge that they love to share. And that's why we do it. I think that's one of my biggest aspirations, is to give it back. I love to teach and I love to get that knowledge, and that's why you do it, and that's why I get Eric Hewitt does it, and another New Hampshire amazing person, right? I mean, that guy has obtained so much knowledge. He's dedicated so much of his life and his brains to learning so much about this that he loves. I mean, he just gives it out. He's bursting with passion and knowledge that he's got so much he loves to give. And that's what I think is so great about the New Hampshire fire side of things, is that we've gotten people that go on out and obtaining all this information, and they just love to give it back, and have that forum and utilize other people who are really passionate about it is something special.
Right. And the other thing about when you go to national conferences is you might be challenged, and this has happened to me quite a few times, right? And I sometimes I almost feel bad if I go maybe 4 or 5 years of teaching something, and then I go to a conference and someone just presents a different way of thinking or some new information, and they're like, hey, like, here's this new thing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been wrong, right? And or like, I never thought of it that way.
Mhm.
And now you're like, how many students did I teach the wrong way, or just almost ingrained in them a wrong mentality? And I almost want to be like, wait. Like, I want to find all these people and be like, wait, I have something new. Like, I just learned something new. And, but I can't now. It's like, some of them have gone on. And so some of my hope is that, by staying up to date on this stuff, I can either pass along new information. I can tell people, hey, I used to think this way, but I just learned about this and it has changed my view. Or by me going to conferences shows that, yes, I've been doing this for a long time, but that doesn't mean I know everything. And that also doesn't excuse me from having to stay up on things, because things are always changing, right?
Always,
And,
it's fluid.
right. So I can't stay comfortable and say, listen, I've been doing this long enough that I don't need to go learn information, right? So many people also, they they scroll through Instagram and they find something. And here's something that's interesting that I'll bring up that might be controversial, but it's funny. So, have you ever seen the method for forcing entry with a hook?
I'm sorry, you broke out with what?
With a hook, with like a Boston Raker and New York hook, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I've seen that a bunch of times, and I'm like, that's an interesting, it looks like it works, right? And then Bobby Eckhart, who also does a lot of stuff, he was like, this tool is for pulling. You don't use this for forcible entry. And I'm like, well, which is it? Because here you have all these people who are like this, but then you have somebody else who's also clearly knows his job saying like, no, that's inappropriate. And I think that's the beauty is, you have to take those information and you say, okay, yes, I guess at the end of the day you can use that.
Hmm.
That's not how I'm going to do it. I'm going to use my traditional forcible entry tools. But I guess it's good to know that, yeah, that tactic is out there. But that's where, like, instead of, you can't just scroll through Instagram, see a video, and be like, you have to actually evaluate those things. And you need to listen from other people,
Hmm.
and you got to talk about it, right? You got to talk about with your guys on shift and be like, what do you think about this?
You got to vet that knowledge. You can't just, like you said, you can scroll all you want. If you don't put your hands on the tools and actually vet that process, you're gonna be talking out of your ass. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's social media. Obviously, me being on it, it's a great tool to have. You can really get your message out there. You can get some new ways and new ideas and get people thinking. But you got to vet the process. You can't just take everyone's word for gospel because they have a name or they have a certain style. What works for them is not going to work for us. Or maybe they got that technique down and we don't have it yet. And if you see those videos, especially for the younger people, they see it and then they automatically think they know it already without putting their hands on it. That's the important part of these videos is these guys who put out these informational videos, they're doing it because they want you to put your hands on it. It's not just to watch it and talk about it, go, yeah, that's going to work. And then you give it a try on an actual fire call and you break your hook, or you bend it and you do something stupid with it. And you're going to say, well, I saw it on Bobby Eckert's page or I saw it on this other guy's page and they said, I can do it this way. You have to vet that process. And I think that's the point that people are missing is that their informational videos are so strong and so good and so on the point, but you have to vet those people. You have to know their history. You have to do your homework on them and what they're doing and know about the tool. They don't have 8 hours to show you everything about that one tool. And I think that's what some people, like, obviously can't speak for everybody, but I think that's what some people are missing is that They see it, they see a 20-second clip and go, yep, that'll work. And they never try it. And then they get to a door, they get to a car, and they fuck up that tool and they go, well, I saw it. Then the captain's going to say, why did you do it this way? Well, I saw it on Instagram or YouTube, and it seemed like it worked for them.
Right.
So I think that's really important, is to understand that process, to vet the videos, vet the education, and understand the information that they're giving. It's so easy now. The education's right in the palm of our hand, but you still have to do your homework. You still have to put in the work to get those reps in, to make it look easy or understand what they mean by pulling and prying. Because some people might think pulling and prying are the same thing, but they really are two different things. You're using the tool completely different. And I think, again, if you're not knowledgeable in those areas, then that's where you're going to hurt yourself or break your tools. Or when you're actually trying to do it on a real fire scene, you're going to look like a fool because you didn't give it the chance when you could have done it in training. So you're absolutely right that there's so much out there, but we have to be careful how we're wording it or how we're applying it.
And I've gone to presentations with guys who are like, truck and ladder officers from FDNY. And, when they talk, I listen because they have a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of experience. But when they talk about their tactics, I have to keep in mind that, okay, they're talking about their tactics in the context of working with the FDNY. And what may work well for them probably doesn't work exactly well for us. Or it may not be a situation that we would probably find ourselves in. When you're talking about, searching, without a hose line above the fire, I'm like, that's probably not a situation most guys in Hudson are ever going to find themselves in. Right? That's just not how we operate. And so, it's not like what he's saying is wrong, but it just may not be applicable to what I'm doing. So I sit there and I take, hey, what nuggets does he have that I can take in and not disrespect his experience, because there's still a wealth of knowledge and experience that I can get that information from. And, and then on the other hand, there are some people where, I had an argument once. I was teaching a first aid class, and this guy was a previous New York City paramedic. Obviously, wealth of knowledge and experience, but he's been out of the game for like 20 years. I started talking about tourniquets, and he was on the verge of swearing at me because he was saying, those things kill people. I treated plenty of people without them. That will kill somebody. And I just wanted to be like, dude, where have you been? Like, I get it. When I started in EMS, the tourniquet was a no-no. That tourniquet was a last resort. But things change, and I didn't want to disrespect again his experience. He was talking about he's been to plane crashes and all this stuff, and I was like, well, I've never been to a plane crash. I've never treated that many people, but I also am fairly confident that tourniquets don't kill people. And hey, he has his opinion, I have mine.
Yep.
All I can say is that I got data and science to back up my position. He has years of experience, but sometimes, you got to evaluate all of those things together.
I love it. You're absolutely right. I think that you have to constantly keep educating yourself. Like you just said, like tactics keep changing. And if you don't read up on the material and you're not going to educate yourself outside your own little world, you're going to be in your own little world. And then when you get somebody who actually has done their homework, you try to debate them, you're gonna lose. And I think, like we talk about the firefighters going to training conferences and going to these outside educational opportunities, it's the same thing with chiefs. I think that chiefs really need to get out and learn about these, be at the learning circuit, go to these conferences and get down and dirty with the other guys. This is, and they're going to see how these newer tactics work, these newer strategies work. And I'm not talking about sitting down, at a officer's boot camp training, but an actual hands-on, you're getting dirty, you're getting sweaty, a new way to force a door, a new way to throw a ladder, new ideas, so you can see what your guys are passionate about, what they're watching, what they're learning, what they've been begging for a change, or whether it's a hose, a nozzle, a extrication tool. But because the line guys, they're doing their homework, they're seeing that information out there. And I think it's really important for the higher ups to understand that this isn't something they're just pulling out of thin air and go, hey, I want this. It's more of like they've done their homework, they've done the data search, like you said, like tourniquets, like back in the day it was a no-no. Now they've done their data, they've done the research. This is actually work. This is helping patients. So whether it's EMS field or the fire service field, I love when I see chiefs that are out in the field doing work with their guys at these training conferences, and they're putting in the work and they're getting hot and sweaty to learn new ways of doing things or to keep their skills fresh. And that way their guys are gonna have more buy-in for their officers and their chief officers, and they're gonna brag about them, they're gonna boast about them, and then that way that chief is gonna know, okay, yeah, this works. I've seen it now. We've done it multiple times. We've tried to make it fail, and it's not failing. So, yep, we're going to implement this in some of our tactics when we're in the field and actually put it in work, because I put my hands on it, and we've given it all we can to see if it would go sideways, and it didn't. So, yep, we're gonna try this now.
Yeah, and I'll play devil's advocate for just a second.
Sure.
And this is only because now this is one of the benefits and curses of the training officer position. So I get to interact with the shifts quite a bit, right? A little bit more than our chief officers get to do, which is nice because it gives me a lot of insight into every shift, right? So I get to see all the firefighters, all the lieutenants, all the captains. And then I also have a lot of interaction with administration. So I get to see what everybody is talking about and what everybody's perspective is coming into something like this. So while your point is very valid that the chiefs sometimes do need to see this stuff, there is a point too where I almost don't need my chief officers to learn about all the pieces and tools, but I do need them to be learning about how to politic, right? Because at the end of the day, that could be fine if they understand my perspective and they say, oh yeah, we see how important this tool is. But if they don't know how to manage the budget, or they don't know how to ask for more money in the budget and get that money, get that equipment, then it's almost null void, right? There's only one person that can go and convince the board of selectmen that we need additional money for this equipment or this thing, right? And that's the fire chief.
Absolutely.
So I need him to be good at that, and I need the deputy chiefs to also be good with influencing up and influencing down. And the only way that they can do that is go to conferences, but learn those skills, learn how to work within local government, learn to politic correctly. And those are the things that I need, my chiefs. If they get the mission and if they can trust us that, hey, I don't know exactly how this piece of equipment will help because I haven't used it myself, but I trust that Mike and I trust that, his lieutenant and his group of guys that are swearing by this, I trust that they've done their homework. So me as a chief, I don't have time to do that. But what I am going to do is advocate for money in the budget so we can purchase that next year and you guys can get it. Right. So sometimes that's really what's required of the fire chief. And so I see that from both sides, right? Because people on the floor, they talk a lot like you're talking about, like they want to see the chiefs there. And that is important for the chief to be there and be present on the floor. Sure. But sometimes I don't need the chief on the floor. What I need him is to be advocating on our behalf with the taxpayers, with the board of selectmen, so that way we can all keep our jobs and we can keep our budget intact. Sure. Right? And the guys on the floor can't do that. The chiefs need to be able to do that. So
that's a great point. I love it.
Yeah, and that's one of the benefits of the training officer. Like I get to see so much, and I am learning so much. Not only just the basics as to how to do the job, but on the back end, the administrative end of things, and learning how to manage all those pieces for sure.
Oh yeah, it's a tough crown to wear, to be a chief officer, honestly, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's definitely something that I don't think I'd ever want to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I love
no,
being
the more
online.
Yeah, the more I see of it, the more I'm like, I am very happy with where I'm at.
Yeah. So I don't. It's like you said, it's just not the hands-on, but the politics is honestly the politics is probably tougher than the hands-on stuff. Definitely having to deal with the budget and make sure you're doing it right. Because man, if you don't do it right, everyone's coming for your head, and it's your fault.
Right. Yeah.
And
we have a local example of that, right?
Yes, too. Yes.
And those are the things that that as a chief officer, you have to be careful of, is making sure that, politically you're getting savvy. That's the job. And a lot of people say, oh, I don't like the politics. And I agree. But if you don't like the politics, then stay a firefighter.
Exactly.
Yeah, because that's a job requirement when you become a chief, is to do some politicking.
That's what my father-in-law said. My father-in-law being on for 28 years, he retired as a deputy, and his biggest thing was, I don't want to be the chief because I want to be in the field doing stuff with my guys. And he flat out said, I don't want to deal with the politics. That is
Yeah.
the side that I can't do and I don't want to do. And of course, getting older and a little more wiser, I definitely see that. Like that's not an easy job.
Right.
And they may work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, but man, that's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress that they got to deal with coming from both sides, right? You got their bosses that are coming down to them about money and everything else, but then you have your other side coming at you from the other side, about personnel issues and guys complaining about this and things go up the chain just as much as they go down the chain. And when you have it coming up both ways for a chief officer, yeah, it's definitely it's a stressful job for sure.
Right.
Now, where do you see the fire service going in the future, or even now? Do you think it's what do you see for plans, or you've seen a positive change, or things go in a different direction?
So the hard part is, what I've been seeing for a trend for a long time is finding people that want to do this job, right? Recruitment and retention is very difficult. And we saw the first signs of that 10, 15 years ago with the volunteer fire service. And I don't think anybody was prepared for it to also go over into the career side. When I started and I got hired in Hudson, I knew that it was competitive. And I knew that if I turned down the job, somebody else would just pick it up right back up. And when I first got hired, it was, if there was one probationary firefighter on shift, that was enough, right? They could only handle that one probie. And then, at one point we thought it was crazy when every shift had a probie. And we said, wow, every shift right now has a probationary firefighter. And then when they were talking about, whoa, we might have to put 2 probationary firefighters on a shift, they're like, wow, how could we even manage that? And now it's been so regular that we don't even think about it. And now to the point where we're about to have like 3 probies on the shift, and I don't think anybody's blinking an eye. We're like, yep, this is our new reality. And we're also seeing people who don't have, not only lack of experience in the fire service, but that's something that we can deal with. But lack of real, just working on a job and being responsible. When I have to tell some of my recruits, this is a phone and your phone has a calendar app. You should learn how to keep a calendar to make sure that you show up to work at this time. And excuse me, it's been having conversations I never thought that I would have to have, and also try to be respectful of people. But we got into the back of the truck, and I had a probie, and I said, "Hey, can you bring up the number for med control for such and such hospital?" And we have the flip phones on the ambulance, and he didn't know how to work it. And I was like, how did we? You're 8 months into probation. How do we not know that you didn't? But I didn't think to ask. Nobody thought to ask, like, hey, do you know how this phone works? Do you know how to operate a flip phone? He had no idea.
Yeah.
And I started to think, like, whose fault is that? Right? That's our fault. We didn't ask. So now in recruit school, when we go in the back of the truck, I don't take it for granted. I say, hey, everybody, how does this phone work? And see. But even other questions like, do you know how to check tire pressure? Right? Some people, they've never had to check tire pressure before. They don't know how it works. And one of our captains, Dennis, you know him, and I'm sure he'll be fine with telling this story. He said, just kind of like out of exasperation, he was like, can we stop hiring nerds? And I was like, I was like, listen, I'm a nerd, right? And he just like gave me a look like, yeah, I get it. But, I wanted to be like, hey, well, why don't you go find the ex-lumberjack mechanic out there who wants to get a job in the fire service, and you let me know when you find him in 4 or 5 years. Because it's just, that's not happening
The
anymore.
world has changed, sometimes for the better and sometimes not for the better, right? Like technology has taken a lot of that out of their hands. And from what I've seen being an instructor and being in the fire service for a while now, is the hands-on applications have suffered because now we have electronic tools, chainsaws. So let's just go with that, right? We have
Right.
electronic chainsaws, we have electronic extrication tools. They don't need to learn about small engines anymore because now they just throw a battery in it and it works. And I think it's better for the fire service in a way because it's quicker. We don't have to worry about fueling it up. We don't have to worry things about freezing and choking up with smoke. But at the same time, they've lost those important skills of actually how to do some manual things and how to check fuel. I know you've had the situation, and we've seen the situation in my time of them putting the wrong fuel in
Yep.
a truck, right? Like
Right.
the diesel and gas, like they completely screwed those up because they didn't know any better. No one's actually really taught them the difference between diesel and gasoline. And these are life skills. And and I think that's where you're going with it as well, is that we can teach them how to be firefighters. So we can't teach them these life skills that we think they already have. Because for the most, they're kids because we're in our 40s now, and the people we're getting now are 18 to 20 years old. But I know when I was growing up, I learned life skills because life was different then. And now things are more technology. Things are in the palm of their hand. They don't need someone to teach them how to do something because it's in the palm of their hands. The problem being is that it's in their hands, but they never actually have used it in the real world. They've watched it on YouTube or TikTok and things like that, but they've actually never put their hands on anything. They Google it and see how it works, but they actually don't get to actually physically do it. And I think that's part of the issue that I think, from what I see a lot of times, is that they learn it online, but they never applied it in real world. So they don't have those life skills to actually apply it. And now it's our job, unfortunately, to teach them how to be an adult. Whether
Right.
it's operating an old school cell phone, balancing a checkbook, using a calendar, setting an alarm clock. Hell, I have a guy that I used to work with on the previous department. I'm sure he'll love me telling this story. Young kid, he needed to send a letter to the state. I think it was referenced to either CDL or something else going over this EMS. But anyways, he was trying to send out this letter with this document, and he had the manila envelope, and he addressed it like he was a terrorist. So it was the return for him was down where you would put the sender. His stamp was on the wrong side. Things were misspelled. It looked suspicious. And I just died laughing. And I'm looking at this envelope going, this is going to get flagged, right? What do you mean? I said, you look like a terrorist. This is what they look for when people are sorting their mail, because it's spelled incorrectly. Your label's in the wrong spot. I would definitely flag this. And I said, has no one ever taught you how to actually address an envelope? He says, no, I've never sent anything in the mail before. That's a life skill. They're not teaching that in schools anymore, right? Typewriting, keyboarding, those are things we did when we were in school. Balancing checkbooks, these are all paper things. Now it's all technology. So now when they get into the fire service and the EMS field, they haven't had those life skills because they've never had to use them before. They've never been taught them. So we take it for granted because we still send out letters, but everybody else sends out emails. It's a different world.
Yeah, and the other thing is how to interact with other people, right? So, one of our guys, he had a hard time with interacting with patients, and I was having a hard time, like, hey, and I didn't want to ask him, but just like, how many jobs have you had where you've had to have regular adult conversations and regular adult interactions? And if this is their first like real job, even like my first job was working at Hannaford's. So my interactions with was dozens and dozens of people every single day. And some of them were not nice, right? Some of them don't really care that you can't think of off the top of the head where their special brand of green beans are. but learned how to deal with those. I learned how to deal with adults as 16, 17, 18-year-old. And so then when I transitioned to working full-time EMS, it was easy to have conversations with people because I knew how to do that from my previous job. But if this is your first job and now you're handling people in an emergency, which by the way, sometimes when people need groceries, they handle that as an emergency, right? But now it's actual emergencies and you don't know how to interact with people. It makes it very, very difficult. So, and this is all not to say that the future of the fire service is grim. It's just these are the realities that we need to adapt to. And I think that when we start talking about conferences and training, a lot of that needs to be focused on, hey, this is our new reality. You can get upset about it, you can fight it, but it's a reality regardless, right? And it's almost like one example that I was talking with my dad about. So my dad was in the National Guard for 20 years. And he talked about even the difference because we started talking about uniforms in the fire service and how there's debate about what's comfortable and not comfortable and hey, should we let people wear hoodies because, it's more comfortable and do we really care about how people appear? And my dad brought up a good point is that in the military you had to shine your boots and now they wear the tan boots, so now you don't have to worry about keeping those boots shine. But where does that discipline come in? So how and it brings up a good point, and I don't know what your reach is. Some people might hate on me for this, but it's kind of like in the fire service, if we start going to more relaxed uniform standards, where are we implementing discipline to keep people disciplined if that's not what we have to worry about? Right? If we don't have to worry about uniforms, then what do we have to worry about to keep us disciplined?
I definitely think that uniforms are still an important factor. Absolutely. And I think like even shining boots. I don't believe in shining my boots every day.
Right, not every day. No,
Right,
I don't
you're
even
busy.
do that, right?
But if your boots look like shit, then you should probably shine those up a bit, right? But
Right.
I think again with the new generation that there's something that they're not taught, and that's our job to teach them how to simply shine a boot because they've never done it before. So you're right, man. It takes patience from us, but I think we're better people for it. It's just like teaching our kids how to live life. It's our job to teach these kids how to live life, and that's being the senior guy or the officer or whatever your responsibility is. I'm 46 years old, so we've lived life a bit, and
Yeah.
it's my job in the fire department to teach the younger ones how to be firefighters. And that's not just a hands-on application of being a firefighter, but actually how to live life as a firefighter. Then that's shining boots, wearing a uniform appropriate. Fuck, if I have to teach them how to shave, I'll teach it. I'll show you how to shave if you've never done it before.
Right.
But I'm glad to take on that role and to help them to be better men and women, and that way they can carry on that message to the newer generations of firefighters.
Yeah, it's definitely like a balance where I don't want to be the guy like, oh, back in my day, I don't want to sound like the old fogey just yet, but there's, definitely a difference between when I entered the fire service and where it is now. And, some things are good, some things are bad, but ultimately, I feel like it's my role as a training officer that if I want to see a change, then I need to work at it. And I can't just force it, right? Part of it is I could just snap my fingers and say, you will do this. It's not going to produce the results that I want. If I want, what's that?
It has to be organic. It has to flow.
Right.
You can't just insert whatever you believe onto that person and how to live life. You have to let it come naturally. And if you try to force your beliefs or not let it grow naturally, they're going to grow to resent you.
Absolutely.
Just like your kids.
Right.
If you have kids, if you try to force your lifestyle on them, they're going to end up growing to resent you because they're going to see the outside world and they're going to be like, well, I don't know why my dad taught me that, where I could have done it this way. They're going to resent you for it.
Right. And a lot of when I'm trying to think about training and implement training, I always have to ask myself, like, what is going to be my challenge with this, right? Who's going to challenge me? Because there's going to be at least one or two people that are going to challenge me on it, no matter what. That's fire service, right?
That's what we do.
Right.
What we do, man.
I have to think about who's going to challenge me on this and who's going to say, why are we doing this? And I have to come up with good reasons, right? And if I can't come up with a good reason, I know I'm going to be in trouble, right? Because somebody's going to call me out. And then I
Especially
start,
the newer generations, they're really good at asking why.
oh yeah, right? Like, hey, like, what is the purpose of this? And if I can't come up with a good reason, or I can come up with a reason and it may not be good, I could just be like, well, this is the way we've always done it. And then, and then you say that and you're like, geez, okay, well, why do we do it this way,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if I can't come up with a good reason, then I need to ask myself too, like, why are we doing this, right? If I can't come up with a good reason as to why we're doing something, then then maybe we shouldn't be doing it. So one of the things that I have to look for, especially with all these new people, is saying why we're doing it. And I think the other thing is, balancing all the different things that we could face as a department, right? We could go to the big tanker explosion. We could go to the big high angle rope rescue. Like, there's 1,000 things that we could respond to, but what are we most likely going to respond to? And what can we reasonably do to prepare for that? What's a reasonable training? We only have a finite amount of time to do training. So where do we wisely use that training time instead of wasting on something that may only happen once every 10 years? Is it worth it to do, 8 or 10 hours of training on that? I have to kind of weigh all that.
It's a lot. Kyle, you nailed a lot of it, dude. Thank you so much, man,
You're
for
welcome.
being a part of this.
Absolutely.
I'm so happy we finally got together to do this. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I hope to have you on again, actually. I feel like we could talk for another hour and a half.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah. If you got a spot in your schedule, just let me know and we'll make it happen.
Definitely. I think we got a lot more to talk about. I think we're going to hit some good topics. So, Kyle Levesque, Hudson Fire Department, training captain for the Hudson Fire Department. Also, make sure you keep a lookout for the New Hampshire Fire Conference in September. I'm excited to see that. I missed them a couple of last year. I think I was traveling. So I really want to be there this year for it. Maybe I can help out with whatever you need. And also see you at the Explorer Academy this year. We got plannings going on in January through this month to get the ball rolling, and we're excited to see that happen again this year. Hudson Fire Department training captain, dude, you rock. Thank you so much for being on the C.A.N report. You stay right there. We're just going to end this real quick. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in to the C.A.N report. I really appreciate your support. You guys have been fantastic. I couldn't keep doing this if it wasn't for you guys. So thank you so much for believing in me to get this message out. And thank you to my guests for being on the show. And I'm going to give a special shout out to Blake Stennett of Next Rung. He is recovering from his motor vehicle accident he suffered on the job. He has been going through multiple surgeries. There is a fundraiser that is set up for him. So please, if you can, look on social media. There's a whole bunch of people that are doing a lot of great work to give him, his wife, the funds available to help him recover so they don't have to worry during that process. Next Rung has been a huge, huge asset to everybody in the fire service and first responder field who need help. They care about us. They care about mental health. So if you can give back, that would be fantastic. Again, Kyle Levesque, dude, you're awesome. Can't wait to talk to you again. Thank you all for watching and listening. Till next time, Nozzle Top.